A single gunshot echoed through the desolate plains of Wyoming Territory in 1878, startling Zara Jameson from her fitful sleep and sending her heart racing. She clutched the tattered quilt to her chest, the familiar weight of dread settling over her like the dust that coated everything in her small homestead. 3 months a widow, and still she reached for Thomas's side of the bed each morning, finding only cold emptiness where his warmth should be. The pale light of dawn filtered through threadbare curtains as Zara forced herself to rise. Her limbs felt heavy, weighed down by grief and exhaustion. The homestead that had once been their dream now felt like a burden she could not possibly bear alone. Thomas had been gone since spring, taken by a fever that swept through the settlement with merciless efficiency, leaving her with 40 acres of unforgiving land, dwindling supplies, and crushing loneliness. Zara splashed cold water on her face from the basin, the shock temporarily clearing the fog from her mind. She had promised Thomas she would make it work, would keep their land, would survive. But the promise grew heavier with each passing day. Outside, the endless Wyoming sky stretched blue and indifferent above the golden prairie grass that swayed in the morning breeze. Her small garden was withering in the summer heat, the corn stalks yellowing despite her daily efforts. The lone milk cow lowed from the small barn, reminding Zara of yet another task awaiting her trembling hands. She had just finished milking when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Visitors were rare this far from town, and unexpected ones rarely brought good news. Zara straightened her faded dress, pushed a strand of dark hair behind her ear, and stepped out of the barn, shielding her eyes against the morning sun. A man on horseback approached, his figure silhouetted against the rising sun. As he drew closer, she could make out broad shoulders, a worn Stetson, and the distinctive shape of a rifle in his saddle holster. The stranger rode with the easy confidence of someone at home in the saddle, guiding his chestnut gelding with subtle movements. "Morning, madam," he called out, stopping a respectful distance from the house. "Name's Finn Tucker. Was passing through and heard a shot. Everything all right out here?" Zara's brow furrowed. "I heard it too, but it wasn't from here, probably just a hunter." The cowboy dismounted with fluid grace, keeping his hands visible. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 25 or 26, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. His clothes were trail-worn but clean, and despite her wariness, Zara detected no immediate threat in his demeanor. "You're alone out here?" Finn asked, his gaze sweeping over the homestead with a practiced eye. "My husband." Zara began, then swallowed hard. "He passed this spring." Something softened in Finn's expression. "I'm sorry to hear that, Mrs. Jameson, Zara Jameson, Mrs. Jameson. It's not my place to say, but this is rough country for anyone to manage alone." Zara lifted her chin. "I'm managing just fine, Mr. Tucker." A half-smile touched his lips as he glanced at the struggling garden, the sagging fence line, the weathered barn in need of repair. "Of course you are." His tone wasn't mocking but understanding, which somehow made it worse. Zara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Is there something you needed, Mr. Tucker?" Before he could answer, a sharp pain lanced through her side, the same pain that had been plaguing her for days. She gasped, doubling over, the milk pail slipping from her grasp and clattering to the ground, its precious contents spilling across the dirt. Finn moved quickly, closing the distance between them. "Mrs. Jameson," the world tilted alarmingly. Zara tried to straighten, to assure this stranger she was fine, but her legs refused to cooperate. "I just need to sit for a moment," she managed, but even as the words left her mouth, she knew it was more than that. Weeks of poor sleep, inadequate meals, and unrelenting work had finally caught up with her. "I'm too weak," she whispered, hating the admission. The cowboy's arms were around her before she could fall, strong and steady. "Then lean on me," he answered simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Zara wanted to protest, to push away from this stranger's embrace, but her body betrayed her. The last thing she remembered was being lifted, cradled against a broad chest that smelled of leather, horses, and the open plains. When she woke, Zara was in her own bed, a cool cloth on her forehead. Through the window, she could see the sun had moved well past its zenith. She'd lost hours. Panic surged through her as she tried to sit up. "Easy now," came a deep voice from the doorway. Finn Tucker stood there, a steaming cup in his hands. "You've got a fever. My animals are tended to, cows milked, chickens fed, horse watered." He approached, offering the cup. "It's just broth. Found a ham bone in your cold box and made some soup." Zara accepted the cup with shaking hands, eyeing him suspiciously. "Why are you helping me?" Finn settled into the chair beside her bed. Thomas's chair, she realized with a pang. "My ma raised me to believe you don't ride past someone in trouble, and you, Mrs. Jameson, are in trouble whether you want to admit it or not." She sipped the broth, warmth spreading through her chest. It was good, far better than she'd managed to make for herself lately. "I don't need charity." "It's not charity, it's being neighborly." "We're not neighbors. You said yourself you were just passing through." Something flashed across his face, hesitation, perhaps. "I was heading to Sweetwater, looking for work." "There's nothing for you here," Zara said, but even to her own ears, the words rang hollow. Finn's gaze traveled around the small bedroom, taking in the patched quilt, the worn floorboards, the simple furniture Thomas had crafted with his own hands. "I see plenty that needs doing. And you need time to heal. I can't pay you. Room and board for a few days is payment enough. Once you're back on your feet, I'll move on." He stood, taking the empty cup from her hands. "Rest now. We can talk more when you're stronger." Zara wanted to argue, to insist she didn't need his help, but exhaustion pulled at her, dragging her back toward sleep. The last thing she saw was Finn Tucker's broad shoulders as he ducked through the doorway, carrying her cup as if he belonged in her home. For 3 days, Zara drifted in and out of consciousness, the fever burning through her like wildfire. Sometimes she woke to find Finn changing the cloth on her forehead or coaxing her to drink more broth. Other times, she heard him moving about the homestead, the sounds of hammering or chopping wood filtering through her fevered dreams. On the 4th day, she woke clear-headed for the first time, the fever broken. Weak but determined, Zara changed into a fresh dress and made her way outside, bracing herself against the doorframe as the world tilted momentarily. What she saw took her breath away. The garden had been weeded and watered, new rows of seedlings sprouting where there had been only parched earth before. The fence had been mended, the barn door rehung, the chicken coop reinforced, and there was Finn, shirtless in the summer heat, splitting logs with powerful swings of an axe. She must have made some sound, for he turned, lowering the axe and reaching for his shirt draped over the woodpile. "You should be resting," he called, pulling the garment over his head as he approached. "I've rested enough," Zara replied, though she gripped the doorframe tighter as a wave of dizziness passed through her. "You've been busy." Finn shrugged, a gesture she was coming to recognize as characteristic. "Place needed some work." "Why are you really here, Mr. Tucker?" The question had been burning in her mind through her feverish haze. Men didn't simply appear and offer help without expecting something in return. That was a lesson she'd learned early in life. He studied her for a long moment, those stormy eyes unreadable. "Would you believe me if I said I was just passing through?" "No," a smile tugged at his lips. "Smart woman," he sighed, removing his hat and running a hand through sweat-dampened hair. "Truth is, I knew your husband, not well, but we worked together once, driving cattle from Texas up to Cheyenne. He talked about you, about this place. When I heard in town that Thomas Jameson had died, leaving a widow out here alone, I thought I'd check on you." The mention of Thomas's name sent a fresh wave of grief through Zara. She hadn't known he'd driven cattle. There were so many parts of his life before her that remained mysteries. "He never mentioned you. No reason he would. It was just one drive 3 years back." Finn replaced his hat, squinting at the horizon. "I should have come sooner, I'm sorry." The sincerity in his voice disarmed her. Zara found herself nodding, accepting his explanation even as questions lingered. "You've done more than enough, Mr. Tucker. I can manage now." Finn's gaze swept over her, the pallor of her skin, the way she leaned heavily against the doorframe. "With respect, Mrs. Jameson, you can't. Not yet. Give it another week. Let me finish what I've started and then I'll be on my way if that's what you want." A week. Zara looked at the improvements he'd already made, improvements that would have taken her months on her own if she could have managed them at all. One more week of his help could mean the difference between survival and failure when winter came. 1 week, she agreed reluctantly. "And then we'll settle accounts." Finn nodded, returning to his woodpile without another word, leaving Zara to wonder if she'd just made a terrible mistake or the most practical decision of her life. The week stretched into 2 as summer blazed across the Wyoming plains. Zara regained her strength gradually, moving from simple indoor tasks to helping with the garden, which was now flourishing under Finn's care. He knew farming as well as ranching, it seemed, and had a way with growing things that rivaled her own father's green thumb. They fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side during the day, sharing quiet meals in the evening. Finn slept in the barn, despite Zara's eventual offer of the small spare room. "Wouldn't be proper," he'd said simply, and she hadn't pressed the issue, though the house felt emptier each night when he bid her good evening and walked back to the barn. It was during these evening meals that Zara began to know the man behind the capable hands and quiet strength. Finn Tucker had been born in Kentucky, the son of a farmer who'd lost everything in the war. At 16, he'd headed west, working as a cowhand, a mustanger, occasionally a scout for the army. He'd seen more of the frontier than most men twice his age, but there was a restlessness in him, a searching quality that resonated with something in Zara's own heart. "Never found a place that felt like home," he admitted one evening as they sat on the porch, watching lightning flicker on the distant horizon. "Kept thinking the next town, the next job would be where I belonged." Zara understood that feeling all too well. She'd married Thomas partly for love, partly for security, hoping to find in their homestead the sense of belonging that had eluded her since her parents died. Sometimes she'd found it in quiet moments working alongside her husband, but even then, there had been something missing, some piece of herself she couldn't quite identify. "And now?" she asked, watching his profile in the fading light. Finn was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. "Now I'm not sure what I'm looking for anymore," he finally said, his voice low. "But I know I haven't found it yet." The admission hung between them, weighted with unspoken possibilities. Zara looked away, focusing on the storm building in the distance, trying to ignore the answering storm building within her. That night, alone in the bed she'd shared with Thomas, Zara faced an uncomfortable truth. She was beginning to care for Finn Tucker in ways that had nothing to do with gratitude for his help. The realization brought both guilt and a strange, fragile hope. Thomas had been gone only a few months. Was it disloyal to feel this flicker of interest in another man? Or was it simply the natural response of a heart beginning to heal? The following day brought the first test of their growing partnership. Zara was gathering eggs when she heard the approach of riders, 3 men on dusty horses, their expressions hard beneath the brims of their hats. She recognized the leader immediately. Edgar Baines, a cattle baron who owned the sprawling ranch that bordered her property to the north. He'd made offers on their land before, offers Thomas had firmly refused. Finn emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag, his stance relaxed but alert as the riders approached. "Mrs. Jameson," Baines called, ignoring Finn completely. "Been meaning to pay my respects since your husband's passing." His gaze traveled over the improvements to the homestead, his expression souring. "I see you've hired help." "Mr. Tucker is a friend," Zara replied, moving to stand beside Finn. "What brings you here, Mr. Baines?" The rancher dismounted, handing his reins to one of his men. Same as before, I want to buy your land. Difference is, the price I'm offering now is a fair sight less than what I offered your husband. This land isn't for sale, Zara said firmly. Not to you, not to anyone. Baines's smile didn't reach his eyes. Be reasonable, woman. You can't work this place alone. Winter's coming. Take my offer, move to town, find yourself another husband if you're so inclined. Finn stepped forward, his voice level but carrying an edge Zara hadn't heard before. Mrs. Jameson has given you her answer. Baines finally acknowledged him, looking Finn up and down with undisguised contempt. And who might you be, boy? Name's Tucker. Finn Tucker. Something flickered across Baines's face, recognition, perhaps, or wariness. Tucker, heard that name before. You rode with the Hammond outfit last year, didn't you? For a time, Baines snorted. Hired gun pretending to be a farmhand. Interesting choice, Mrs. Jameson. Mr. Tucker is a guest, Zara said, her voice stronger than she felt. And as I said, this land is not for sale. The rancher's expression hardened. Water's going to be scarce this summer. That creek that runs through your property might just dry up if it gets diverted upstream. Be a shame if your crops failed. He mounted his horse with surprising agility for his bulk. Think about my offer. It won't get better. They watched in silence as the three riders departed, dust rising from their horses' hooves. He'll be trouble, Finn said quietly. Zara nodded, her heart racing. He always has been. Thomas, she stopped, swallowing hard. Thomas stood up to him. I need to do the same. Finn turned to her, his expression grave. Baines has money and men. Standing up to him isn't going to be easy. Is that why you're going to leave? The question slipped out before she could stop it, revealing more of her fears than she'd intended. Something softened in his gaze. Is that what you think? That I'd run at the first sign of trouble? People usually do, Zara said quietly, thinking of all those who'd offered condolences after Thomas's death, promised to help, then disappeared when the reality of her situation became clear. I'm not most people. Finn's hand brushed hers, just the lightest touch, but it sent warmth spreading up her arm. I said I'd help you get this place ready for winter, and I meant it. Baines doesn't change that. Relief washed through her, followed immediately by confusion. She shouldn't be this affected by his decision to stay, shouldn't feel this flutter in her chest when he stood close. Thank you, she managed, stepping away, needing distance to clear her head. Finn watched her retreat, something unreadable in his eyes. Zara, he called, the first time he'd used her given name. I meant what I said before. You can lean on me, for as long as you need. The simple sincerity in his voice nearly undid her. Zara nodded once, not trusting herself to speak, and hurried back to the house, where she pressed her hands to her burning cheeks and tried to make sense of the emotions warring within her. True to Baines's threat, they woke the next morning to find the creek reduced to a trickle. Finn rode upstream and discovered men had dammed the water where it crossed Baines's property. He returned grim-faced but determined, immediately beginning work on a series of barrels to catch rainwater. We can dig the well deeper, too, he said as they worked side by side. There's groundwater here, we just need to reach it. We. The word settled over Zara like a warm blanket. It had been so long since she'd been part of a we, since she'd had someone to share her burdens. Even with Thomas, there had been a distance. Sometimes he'd handled the hard decisions, the planning, keeping his worries to himself to spare her. Finn was different, including her in every decision, teaching her the skills she would need when he eventually moved on, because he would move on. That was the reality she had to face. No matter how smoothly they worked together, no matter how much she'd come to value his presence, Finn Tucker was a wanderer. He'd said it himself, he was still searching for something. And Zara knew, with a certainty that ached, that he wouldn't find it here with her. Summer gave way to early autumn, bringing cooler nights and golden light that stretched across the plains. Zara and Finn's efforts were bearing fruit literally, in the case of the small orchard they'd tended. The garden yielded a bounty that kept Zara busy canning and preserving, the root cellar filling with provisions for the winter. Despite Baines's attempts to starve them of water, They had managed to coax enough life from the soil to survive, but Baines wasn't done with them. His men began riding close to the property line, sometimes firing shots into the air, other times simply watching the homestead from a distance. The intimidation was constant, but just subtle enough that there was nothing Finn could report when he rode into town to speak with the sheriff. "Law won't help us," he told Zara upon his return. "Sheriff's in Baines's pocket, says it's not illegal for men to ride their own property or go hunting." Zara had expected as much. She'd seen how power worked in this territory. Men like Baines took what they wanted, and the law looked the other way. "Then we defend ourselves," she said firmly, surprising herself with her own resolve. Finn's eyebrows rose. "You know how to shoot. Thomas taught me." "I'm not expert, but I can hit what I aim at." She hadn't touched Thomas's rifle since his death, but it was still there, hanging above the fireplace, loaded and ready. A slow smile spread across Finn's face. "Well then, Mrs. Jameson, I think it's time we practiced. If Baines wants a fight, we'll give him one he's not expecting." The next day, Finn set up targets behind the barn cans on fence posts at varying distances. Zara was rusty, her first few shots going wide, but Finn was a patient teacher. He stood behind her, adjusting her stance, his hands warm on her shoulders as he demonstrated how to breathe through the shot. "Steady," he murmured, his breath stirring the hair at her temple. "Take your time. Feel the rifle become part of you." Zara was acutely aware of his proximity, of the solid wall of his chest just inches from her back. She forced herself to focus on the target, exhaling slowly as she squeezed the trigger. The can flew off the post with a satisfying ping. "Good." Finn's hands squeezed her shoulders in approval. Again, they practiced until Zara's arms ached, but by the end, she was hitting targets consistently. The sense of accomplishment, of regaining a skill she'd let lapse, was empowering. So was the knowledge that she wasn't facing Baines alone. That evening, as they sat by the fire after dinner, a comfortable silence between them, Zara found herself studying Finn's profile. The firelight played across his features, highlighting the strong line of his jaw, the thoughtful set of his mouth. He'd become more than a helper, more than a friend. He was someone she trusted implicitly, someone who made her feel safe and valued in a way she hadn't felt in a very long time. As if sensing her gaze, Finn turned to look at her, a question in his eyes. Zara quickly looked away, embarrassed to be caught staring. "I should check on the animals before turning in," she said, rising from her chair. Finn stood as well. "I'll come with you." Outside, the night was crisp and clear, stars scattered like diamond dust across the velvet sky. They walked to the barn in companionable silence, their breath forming small clouds in the cool air. Inside, the animals shifted sleepily in their stalls, the familiar sense of hay and livestock enveloping them. "They're settling in well for the night," Zara observed, running a hand along her horse's neck. Finn nodded, leaning against a post. "Zara," he said softly, the use of her given name still rare enough to make her heart skip. "There's something I need to tell you." The seriousness in his tone made her stomach clench with apprehension. "What is it?" He hesitated, then reached into his shirt pocket, withdrawing a folded piece of paper. "This came for me when I was in town today. Job offer, guiding a group of settlers to Oregon. They leave in 2 weeks." The words hit Zara like a physical blow. She'd known this day would come, had tried to prepare herself for it, but the reality was still devastating. 2 weeks. Just 2 more weeks of his steady presence, his quiet strength, his companionship that had become as essential to her as breathing. "I see," she managed, grateful for the dim light that hid her expression. "It's a good opportunity for you." "It is," Finn agreed, refolding the letter. "The pay is good and it could lead to more work." Zara nodded, focusing on her horse's mane, running her fingers through the coarse hair. "You should take it. You've done more than enough here." Finn was silent for a long moment. "Is that what you want? For me to go?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Zara's heart pounded in her chest. What did she want? She wanted him to stay. She wanted to wake each morning knowing he was there to work beside him, to share meals and conversation and quiet evenings. She wanted. "I want you to be happy," she said finally, the safest answer she could give. Finn moved closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cool barn. "And if staying here would make me happy," Zara's breath caught. She turned to face him, finding him much nearer than she'd expected. "Finn. I've been searching for something for a long time," he said quietly, his eyes intense in the lantern light. "Never knew what it was until I found it here, with you." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his touch feather light against her cheek. "I don't want to leave, Zara. But I won't stay where I'm not wanted." The walls Zara had built around her heart since Thomas's death began to crumble. She leaned into Finn's touch, closing her eyes briefly. "I don't want you to go," she whispered, the admission both frightening and freeing. Finn's other hand came up to cradle her face, his thumbs stroking gently across her cheekbones. "Then I'll stay, for as long as you'll have me." Time seemed to slow as he lowered his head, giving her every chance to pull away, but Zara didn't want to pull away. She rose on her tiptoes, meeting him halfway, her lips finding his in a kiss that felt like coming home after a long journey. His arms encircled her, drawing her closer, and Zara melted against him, her hands gripping the front of his shirt. The kiss deepened, years of loneliness dissolving in the warmth of their shared breath. When they finally parted, Zara rested her forehead against his chest, listening to the rapid beat of his heart. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," she admitted softly. "After Thomas. I thought that part of me was gone." Finn's hand stroked her hair. "I've never felt this way before, not with anyone." The simple honesty in his voice made her look up, meeting his gaze. What she saw there, tenderness, desire, and something deeper that neither of them was quite ready to name, took her breath away. "We should go back to the house," she said, suddenly aware of how alone they were, how easy it would be to let this moment carry them further than she was prepared to go. Finn nodded, understanding in his eyes. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, then stepped back, offering his hand. Zara took it, their fingers intertwining as naturally as if they'd been doing this for years instead of minutes. They were halfway to the house when the crack of a rifle split the night air, and dirt kicked up at their feet. Inside, Finn pushed Zara ahead of him, shielding her with his body as another shot rang out. They sprinted for the house, bullets following their path, splintering wood as they ducked through the door. Finn slammed the door shut behind them, immediately moving to extinguish the lamps. "Stay down," he ordered, grabbing Thomas's rifle from above the fireplace. Zara crawled to the window, keeping below the sill. "How many?" "Can't tell, at least 3, maybe more." Finn crouched beside her, peering cautiously through the glass. "Baines's men has to be." "Why now? Why tonight?" Fear and anger warred within her. Finn's expression was grim in the darkness. "They've been watching, they saw us." He didn't need to finish the sentence. They'd seen the kiss, seen the moment everything changed between them. "This isn't just about the land anymore," Zara realized. "Baines thinks you're staying permanently. He sees you as a threat." Another volley of shots hit the house, one bullet shattering the window above them. Finn pulled Zara away from the spray of glass, covering her with his body. For a heartbeat, they stayed like that, pressed together on the floor, his arms protective around her. "We need to get to better positions," Finn said, his voice calm despite the danger. "You take the back window, I'll cover the front. Don't shoot unless you have a clear target." Zara nodded, accepting the pistol he pressed into her hands. She moved quickly to the rear of the house, staying low, her heart pounding but her hands steady. Outside, she could hear men shouting to each other, moving closer to the house. Minutes stretched into an hour, shots exchanged sporadically. Finn managed to hit one of the attackers. Zara heard a cry of pain followed by cursing, but the others kept their distance, firing from the cover of darkness. "They're trying to wait us out," Finn called softly from his position. "Or they're waiting for reinforcements." Zara wiped sweat from her brow, checking her ammunition. "We can't let them burn us out." "They won't." There was such certainty in Finn's voice that Zara almost believed him. The sheriff may be in Baines's pocket, but even he can't ignore a night attack on a homestead. Baines doesn't want witnesses. As if on cue, a new voice called out from the darkness. Tucker, we know you're in there. The boss just wants the woman off this land. You can ride out now, no harm done. Finn's response was a shot that sent the speaker diving for cover. You're making a mistake, Tucker, the voice called again. This ain't your fight. It is now, Finn answered, his voice carrying easily through the night air. Tell Baines if he wants this land, he'll have to kill me to get it. Silence followed his declaration, broken only by the soft murmur of men conferring. Then hoofbeats several riders moving away from the house. They're leaving, Zara asked incredulously, some of them. Finn didn't relax his vigilance. Could be a trick. They maintained their positions as the night deepened, the initial terror giving way to a tense alertness. Occasionally they'd hear movement outside, a horse shifting, a boot scraping on stone, but no more shots were fired. Dawn broke slowly, pale light creeping across the plains. As visibility improved, Zara could see that their attackers had indeed retreated, leaving behind only trampled grass and spent cartridges as evidence of the night's violence. Finn checked every corner of the property before allowing Zara to leave the house. The morning was surreally peaceful, birds singing, a gentle breeze rustling the grass as if the nighttime attack had been a bad dream. They'll be back, Finn said grimly, examining a bullet hole in the side of the barn. Zara nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. I know. He turned to her, his expression softening. We have choices, Zara. We can stay and fight, knowing they might come back with more men next time. We can try to sell the land to someone other than Baines, though he'd likely scare off any buyer. Or, she prompted when he hesitated. Finn took a deep breath. Or we could leave, start fresh somewhere else. Oregon maybe, I still have that job offer. The suggestion shocked her. Leave the land she and Thomas had worked so hard for, the home they'd built together. It felt like betrayal, and yet, the land was just land. What mattered were the people who worked it, who loved it. Thomas was gone, and holding onto this place wouldn't bring him back, and there was Finn. Finn, who had become more important to her than she'd thought possible. Finn, who was offering her a future instead of just a past. I need time to think, she said finally. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. The decision came to her that evening as she sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. This land had been her and Thomas's dream, but dreams could change. What hadn't changed was her desire for a home, for connection, for love. And those things, she realized with startling clarity, she could find with Finn wherever they went. She found him in the barn, mending a bridle by lantern light. He looked up as she entered, his hands stilling on the leather. I've been thinking about what you said, Zara began, her voice steady despite the nerves fluttering in her stomach. About leaving. Finn set the bridle aside, giving her his full attention. And, this place holds memories for me, good ones, but it also holds pain. She moved closer, taking courage from the warmth in his eyes. I don't need these 4 walls or these acres to remember Thomas. I'll carry him with me wherever I go. Zara, Finn said softly, standing to face her. I want to go to Oregon, she continued, taking his hands in hers. With you, I want to see what we can build together. The smile that broke across his face was like the sun emerging from clouds. He lifted her hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. I was hoping you'd say that. It won't be easy, Zara cautioned, though her heart was singing. Starting over never is. No, Finn agreed, pulling her gently into his arms, but we'll face it together, and whenever you feel weak. I'll lean on you, Zara finished, rising on her toes to meet his kiss. They left Wyoming Territory 2 weeks later, traveling with the wagon train Finn had been hired to guide. Zara sold the homestead to a family from back east, not for what it was worth, but for enough to give them a start in their new life. Baines was furious, but with Finn's reputation spreading through the territory and the new owners bringing 5 strapping sons with them, The cattle baron chose not to press the issue. The journey west was long and arduous, but Zara found strength she never knew she possessed. With Finn beside her, teaching her, supporting her, loving her, she blossomed. They were married by a traveling preacher at a camp along the Snake River, with the wagon-train families as witnesses, and that night, beneath a canopy of stars, they began their life together as husband and wife. Oregon greeted them with verdant forests and fertile valleys. They settled near the Columbia River, building a small ranch where Finn could raise horses, a skill he'd honed during his wandering years, while Zara established gardens that flourished in the rich soil. It wasn't the life either of them had envisioned, but it was the life they chose together, and that made all the difference. 2 years after leaving Wyoming, Zara gave birth to their first child, a daughter with her mother's dark hair and her father's stormy eyes. As she placed the infant in Finn's trembling hands, Zara saw in his face the same wonder she felt, that out of loss and struggle, such perfect joy could emerge. "Thank you," Finn whispered, cradling their daughter against his chest, "for leaning on me that day." Zara smiled, reaching up to touch his face. "Thank you for being there to catch me." Outside their window, the Oregon sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues. A canvas for the future they would create together, a future built not on the ashes of the past, but on the solid foundation of a love neither had expected to find, but both had been brave enough to embrace.